I wanted to surprise my husband at his office. The receptionist smiled politely and said, "Ma'am, only authorized visitors allowed." When I mentioned I was the CEO's wife, she chuckled softly. "Oh, his wife is already here, she just left with him." I took a deep breath, smiled, and decided to find out who I really was to him. The receptionist's words echoed in my head as I stood frozen in that marble lobby. "Oh, his wife is already here, she just left with him about 10 minutes ago. I'm Clara Brennan, data analyst, wife of 6 years. And apparently not the only woman claiming that title. But let me back up. Because 3 hours earlier I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life looked like. Before we continue, if you believe betrayal deserves consequences and that women deserve to know the truth, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach others who need to hear this. Now let's see what I discovered next. I woke up that Wednesday morning the same way I'd woken up for the past 6 years. Alone. Finn had already left for Westridge Capital by the time my alarm went off at 7. He's always been an early riser, out the door by 6:30 to beat traffic and get a jump on the markets. I used to wake up with him in the beginning, make his coffee, kiss him goodbye at the door like we were in some romantic movie. But somewhere along the way, we'd both decided sleep was more valuable than those small rituals. Our townhouse in Queens Ridge is modest by the neighborhood standards. We stretched our budget to afford it because Finn said the address mattered for networking. I remember the realtor showing us property after property, Finn dismissing anything that didn't have the right zip code. We settled on a place that needed work. Outdated kitchen, garden overgrown with weeds, front door that stuck in humid weather. I told myself we'd make it ours. And we did in a way. I spent weekends pulling weeds and planting roses while Finn worked. Last spring we finally painted that stubborn front door a deep navy blue. Finn held the ladder while I did the actual painting. It was one of the few projects we completed together. I work from home twice a week, analyzing healthcare data for a nonprofit that advocates for better resource allocation in underserved communities. It's meaningful work that pays significantly less than Finn's job in finance. That gap in our incomes created an unspoken arrangement. I handled more of the household responsibilities because his career was more demanding. I did the grocery shopping, managed our social calendar, coordinated with the lawn service, dealt with the broken dishwasher and the leaky faucet. Finn would come home exhausted and I'd have dinner ready or at least ordered from one of the 3 restaurants we rotated through. I told myself this was partnership. This was what modern marriage looked like when one person earned more. I was being supportive, accommodating. But sometimes, late at night when Finn was asleep beside me, I'd wonder if I'd made myself too small. I'd turned down a promotion 8 months ago because it required regional travel, and Finn's schedule was already so packed. Who would manage the house? Who would host his colleagues for dinner when needed? The practical considerations outweighed my ambition, or at least that's what I told myself. My sister Diane saw through it immediately. We met for coffee every Tuesday morning at the cafe near her apartment. A ritual we'd maintained even through her messy divorce last year. She'd sit across from me with her oat milk latte and study my face like she was looking for cracks in a foundation. "You're fading, Clara," she said 2 weeks ago, not unkindly. "When's the last time you did something spontaneous? Something romantic? You and Finn are roommates with matching last names." I'd defended us. We were comfortable, stable. Not every marriage needed grand gestures and constant excitement. We were building a life together even if the building process looked more like maintenance and routine. "I'm not saying blow up your life," Diane had continued, stirring her coffee with more force than necessary. "I'm saying show up at his office with his favorite pastries. Surprise him. Remind him you exist as more than the person who pays the electric bill and remembers to buy toilet paper." The suggestion lodged itself in my brain. Finn used to bring me flowers at my old office when we first started dating. Small bouquets from the grocery store, nothing expensive, but the gesture mattered. When did we stop doing things like that? When did our marriage become a series of logistical transactions instead of a relationship? So that Wednesday afternoon I left work early. I stopped at the French patisserie downtown, the one with the pink awning and prices that made me wince. Finn loved their lemon tarts, claimed they were better than anything he'd had in Paris during his study abroad. I watched the clerk carefully box 6 of them, tissue paper crinkling, and handed over $17 I'd normally save. The box felt precious in my hands as I drove toward the financial district, rehearsing what I'd say. Surprise. I know you're busy, but I wanted to bring you something sweet. I was in the neighborhood and thought of you. Remember when you used to bring me flowers? Consider this payback. Each version sounded either too needy or too casual. I settled on just smiling and letting the gesture speak for itself. Westridge Capital occupied 12 floors of a glass tower that reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror. I'd been here exactly 3 times in 6 years. Twice for holiday parties and once when Finn forgot his phone and asked me to drop it off. The building intimidated me with its aggressive modernity, its implication that everyone inside was more important and busier than people like me. The lobby was all marble and metal, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. Abstract art hung on the walls, the type where you couldn't tell if it was upside down. A massive reception desk curved across the center like a fortress wall. I approached the elevators, bakery box in hand, feeling underdressed in my work clothes. Sensible black slacks. A cardigan I'd owned since graduate school. Flats that needed replacing. The receptionist materialized before I could press the call button. She was young, maybe 25, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile was professional but firm. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but only authorized visitors are allowed beyond this point." "Oh, of course. I understand." I smiled, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I'm actually the vice president's wife. Clara Brennan. I won't be long, just dropping something off." The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something that looked uncomfortably like pity. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me. "Oh, his wife is already here. She just left with him about 10 minutes ago. They're heading to a lunch meeting downtown." The words didn't compute. I heard them clearly, but they seemed to belong to a different conversation, maybe meant for someone else standing behind me. I looked over my shoulder. No one was there. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Mr. Brennan's wife," she repeated slower, as though I might not understand English. "She comes by most days around this time. Lovely woman. Always so put together." He paused, studying me with growing uncertainty. "Are you perhaps his sister? Or a colleague from another firm?" My fingers tightened around the bakery box. The pink cardboard bent slightly under the pressure. Behind the reception desk, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the parking garage entrance. I watched, feeling separate from my body, as a sleek silver Audi pulled into downtown traffic. Finn's car. I'd helped him shop for it 2 years ago, sat in the passenger seat while he tested the acceleration. From this distance I could just make out 2 figures inside. Finn driving. A woman beside him with dark hair catching the afternoon light. Both of them laughing at something, heads tilted toward each other in the easy intimacy of people who share private jokes. The receptionist was still waiting for my response, her expression now fully concerned. "My mistake," I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal, almost cheerful. "Wrong floor apparently. The building directory can be confusing." Her relief was immediate and obvious. "Oh, that happens all the time. Can I help you find who you're looking for?" "No thank you. I've got it figured out." I walked back through those glass doors with measured steps, shoulders back, face composed. The kind of walk that suggests you have somewhere important to be, not that your entire world just shifted on its axis. The first trash can I passed swallowed $17 of French pastry without ceremony. The 3-block walk to my car felt longer than it should have. My legs moved automatically, one foot in front of the other, while my brain tried to process what the receptionist had said. His wife was already there. His wife comes by most days. Lovely woman. Always so put together. I reached my Honda Civic and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. My hands were still shaking. I gripped the steering wheel to steady them, but that only made the trembling more obvious. There had to be an explanation. A rational one. I'm a data analyst. I solve problems by examining evidence and finding patterns. This was just incomplete data. The receptionist was new and confused. Or there was another Brennan at the firm. Or Finn had mentioned me so often that she'd mix me up with someone else. Except none of those explanations fit the data. I pulled out my phone. Finn and I had set up location sharing years ago, back when I'd read an article about couples staying connected through technology. It seemed romantic at the time, or at least practical. Now I opened the app with fingers that barely cooperated. The blue dot showed him at Bellamy's on the waterfront. The restaurant where entrees started at $40 and you needed reservations weeks in advance. He told me this morning over his shoulder while grabbing his briefcase that he had a working lunch with potential investors. Routine business. Nothing unusual. My thumb hovered over his contact. I could call him right now. Ask him directly. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the receptionist's certainty. Maybe it was the image of that woman's dark hair catching the light as she laughed in his car. Maybe it was 6 years of small moments I'd been ignoring suddenly clicking into a pattern I didn't want to see. Instead I opened LinkedIn. Typed Westridge Capital into the search bar. The company profile showed 43 employees. I scrolled through them methodically, not entirely sure what I was looking for. Junior analysts. Administrative staff. Senior partners. Then I stopped. Natasha Winters. Senior portfolio manager. Her profile picture showed a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair styled in elegant waves. She wore confidence like expensive jewelry. Natural, effortless, the kind that comes from knowing exactly where you belong. Her background included Wharton Business School, 5 years at Morgan Stanley, 3 years at Westridge Capital. I clicked through to her activity. She was tagged in multiple company photos. A conference panel where she sat 3 seats down from Finn. A client dinner where they stood side by side, wine glasses raised. An office celebration for closing a major deal, her hand on his shoulder while they posed with the team. Then I found the photo that made my chest tighten. A corporate retreat in Napa from 2 months ago. Natasha and Finn standing close together on a terrace overlooking vineyards. Both holding wine glasses. Her hand resting casually on his forearm. The caption read, "Strategy sessions and sunsets with the best team in the business." I'd known about that retreat. Finn had called me twice during those 3 days. Complained about boring presentations and mediocre hotel food. Asked how I was managing without him as though I were incapable of 3 days alone. He'd brought home a bottle of wine from the hotel gift shop and said he'd missed me. He hadn't mentioned Natasha. Not once. My phone buzzed. A text from Finn. Investor lunch running long. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. I stared at those 2 words at the end. Love you. Casual as punctuation. Automatic as a signature line. I didn't respond. Instead, I started my car and drove toward the waterfront. This was insane. I knew it was insane even as I merged into downtown traffic. I have a doctorate in public health analytics. I present research at conferences. I make decisions based on evidence and logic. I don't sit in parking lots conducting surveillance on my own husband like some character in a bad television drama. Except apparently I do. Bellamy sat on a pier with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Valet parking only, but there was a public lot adjacent to the building that served the nearby marina. I pulled in and found a spot with a direct sight line to the restaurant entrance. Then I waited. The sun was warm through my windshield. A seagull landed on the hood of the car next to mine looking for scraps. I watched people come and go from the marina. Couples in sailing gear, families with coolers, an elderly man walking a small dog. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Wednesday afternoon. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Confirmation? Proof? Evidence that would make sense of the sick certainty growing in my chest? At 2:15, Finn and Natasha emerged from the restaurant. They were laughing. Not polite business laughter but genuine amusement, the kind where Finn's head tilted back slightly and his shoulders shook. He was wearing the navy suit I'd helped him pick out last month. We'd gone to 3 different stores before finding one that fit his shoulders right. He'd stood in front of the mirror and asked if it made him look competent. I told him it made him look like someone who could be trusted. Natasha wore a cream dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. Heels that added 3 inches to her height. She moved with the grace of someone who'd never felt out of place anywhere. They looked like they belonged together. Polished. Successful. Comfortable in a world of waterfront restaurants and valet parking. The valet brought Finn's Audi around. Finn opened the passenger door for Natasha, and as she got in, his hand briefly touched her lower back. Just a small gesture. Nothing dramatic. But it spoke to familiarity. To habit. To muscle memory that comes from repetition. I'd seen Finn open car doors for colleagues before at company events. He never touched their backs. They pulled out of the parking lot, Finn checking his blind spot with the careful attention he always brought to driving. I let 2 cars get between us before following. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. This was really happening. I was really following my husband through downtown traffic like a private investigator in a movie I never wanted to star in. They drove back toward the financial district. For a moment I thought they were returning to Westridge Capital. That maybe I'd gotten everything wrong. Maybe this really was just a business lunch running long. Then the Audi turned into the parking garage of the Grandview Hotel. The Grandview. A boutique property known for hosting business travelers and couples seeking discretion in equal measure. Expensive enough to feel exclusive, discreet enough that you wouldn't run into people you knew. My hands were shaking again. There could be legitimate reasons for this. A meeting with clients staying at the hotel. A conference room rental for private discussions. Finn's firm did business with out-of-town investors all the time. I repeated these explanations to myself while I parked across the street and watched them enter the lobby together. I gave them 5 minutes. Counted to 300 in my head while staring at the hotel entrance. Then I got out of my car and followed. The Grandview's lobby was designed for intimacy. Dark wood paneling. Soft lighting that made everything look like a sepia photograph. Leather chairs arranged in small groupings. A fireplace that probably worked even though it was April. The front desk clerk was helping another guest, an older man asking about restaurant recommendations. I slipped past toward the elevators and caught a glimpse of the directory board mounted on the wall. Conference rooms, 2nd floor. Guest rooms, floors 3 through 12. I positioned myself in a small business center off the lobby. Just an alcove really, with a desktop computer and printer available for guest use. From here I could see the elevator bank without being obvious. I watched the numbers above each door, tracking which floors lit up, which elevators stopped where. At 2:40 one elevator stopped on the 7th floor. And didn't move. I stood there for another 10 minutes watching those numbers. The elevator eventually came back down empty. Went back up to 7. Stayed there. This was the moment I could leave. Walk out, go back to my car, drive to my office and pretend this afternoon never happened. Choose ignorance. Choose trust. Choose the version of my marriage I'd been living for 6 years. My feet carried me to the front desk instead. The clerk greeted me with practiced warmth. Young, professional, probably working here to pay for college. Welcome to the Grandview. How may I assist you? I'm meeting my husband, I said. My voice sounded steady. Almost normal. Finn Brennan. He said he'd leave a message about the room number, but I'm not seeing anything. She typed on her keyboard, manicured nails clicking against the keys. Her expression remained carefully neutral. I'm sorry, but I don't have any messages for you. And I'm not able to provide room information without authorization. Of course. I understand. I smiled the way I smile during difficult conversations at work. Professional. Pleasant. Could you perhaps ring the room? He's expecting me. More typing. A slight pause. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine and I saw something there. Sympathy maybe, or recognition of a situation she'd witnessed before. I'm showing a Mr. Brennan did check in today for a single night. However, our policy prevents me from connecting calls without the guest's explicit consent. I apologize for the inconvenience. A single night. Not a meeting room. Not a conference space. A hotel room booked for overnight. That's fine, I managed. I'll just text him. Thank you for your help. I walked back to my car on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Sat in the driver's seat. Stared at my phone. The evidence felt overwhelming and insufficient at the same time. Finn was in a hotel room in the middle of the afternoon with a colleague who apparently visited his office so regularly the receptionist thought she was his wife. But I didn't have proof. Not really. Just proximity. Just opportunity. Just the sinking certainty that something fundamental had shifted beneath my feet. I texted my supervisor, not feeling well. Taking sick leave for rest of day. Then I drove home to our townhouse in Queens Ridge. The neighborhood we'd stretched to afford. The address that mattered for networking. I parked in our driveway and sat there staring at the house. The navy blue door we'd painted together. The roses I'd planted along the walkway that were just starting to bloom. The window boxes Finn had hung last fall, saying they'd add curb appeal. Everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning. But I was different. The world was different. I forced myself to get out of the car and go inside. The house felt too quiet. Too normal. The dishes from breakfast were still in the sink. Finn's coffee mug with the faded logo from some financial conference sat on the counter where he'd left it. I picked it up, felt the weight of it in my hand, and had the strangest urge to throw it against the wall just to hear something break. Instead, I washed it, dried it, put it back in the cupboard with the others. Then I went to Finn's office. The door was closed but not locked. He'd always been particular about this space. His territory, his domain, the place where he worked on sensitive financial matters that I wouldn't understand. I'd respected that boundary for 6 years. Never snooped. Never questioned. Respect felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. His desk was immaculate. Finn organized everything with the same precision he brought to his work. Files sorted alphabetically. Pens in a holder. A single photo frame showing the two of us on our wedding day, both smiling like we knew something the rest of the world didn't. I opened the desk drawer. Office supplies. Business cards from networking events. A stack of sticky notes. Then, tucked in the back inside an old business card holder, I found a small key. The filing cabinet was locked. Of course it was. The key fit perfectly. Inside were files organized with labels written in Finn's neat handwriting. Tax returns. Investment statements. Insurance policies. Mortgage documents. Everything you'd expect to find in a responsible adult's filing system. Then I found the credit card statements. Not our joint card. A separate account Finn had mentioned years ago, explaining he needed it for business expenses. For tracking purposes. For keeping personal and professional charges separate. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? I trusted him. I pulled out 6 months of statements and spread them across his desk. The pattern revealed itself immediately. Bellamy's. Every Wednesday. Charges ranging from $80 to $150. Lunch for 2 at an expensive restaurant week after week after week. The Grandview Hotel. Monthly charges of $300. Sometimes more. Always on Friday afternoons. Tiffany and Company. A purchase in February for $1,200. I'd received nothing for Valentine's Day except dinner at home and an apology that work had been too hectic for proper celebrating. Cartier. A charge in March for $8,000. My birthday had passed in March with a card and a promise we'd do something special when his schedule cleared. Restaurant after restaurant I'd never been to. Amounts that suggested intimate dinners, not business meals with multiple clients. All on dates when Finn had texted me that he was working late or meeting with investors or dealing with a crisis that required his immediate attention. My hands were steadier than they should have been as I photographed every page. Every charge. Every date. Every lie documented in 12-point font and neat columns. I replaced the statements exactly as I'd found them. Locked the cabinet. Returned the key to its hiding place. Closed the office door behind me. In the kitchen I made coffee. Opened my laptop. Created a new document and titled it Household Expenses Review. Boring enough that Finn wouldn't look twice if he saw it in my recent files. Then I began building a timeline. Cross-referencing the credit card charges with my own calendar. With text messages from Finn. With his explanations for late nights and weekend work sessions and business trips. Each data point clicked into place with devastating precision. The story the evidence told was clear. This wasn't new. This wasn't some recent mistake or moment of weakness. I pulled up Natasha Winter's LinkedIn profile again. Joined Westridge Capital 3 years ago in June. The first suspicious charge appeared in October of that same year. 4 months after she started. 3 years. More than 1,000 days of deception. Of Finn kissing me goodbye in the morning and hello in the evening, sliding seamlessly between 2 versions of his life. Of him sitting across from me at dinner, asking about my day, laughing at my stories, all while maintaining a completely separate relationship with someone else. My phone buzzed. A text from Finn, heading home soon. Want me to pick up dinner? I stared at the message. At the casual assumption that everything was normal. That I would say yes like I always did. That we'd eat together and talk about our days and he'd never suspect that I'd spent the afternoon uncovering 3 years of his lies. I typed back, sure. Thai from Golden Palace. The place we went for low-key date nights. Comfort food. Easy and familiar. Perfect. Be home by 7. I closed my laptop and looked around our kitchen. At the new backsplash we'd installed last year. At the kitchen table where we'd eaten hundreds of meals together. At the refrigerator covered with magnets from places we'd visited and photos of us smiling. The betrayal should have hurt more. Should have left me crying on the floor, unable to function. But instead I felt cold, clear, analytical. Finn had made a calculation. He'd decided he could have both. The stability and comfort of marriage and whatever excitement or fulfillment Natasha provided. He'd built a system that worked for him, carefully compartmentalized, meticulously maintained. He'd underestimated me. Seemed I'd never look, never question, never see past the performance he gave every evening when he came home. At 7:15 his key turned in the lock. "Clara, I'm home." I was setting out plates. Unpacking containers of pad thai and spring rolls and mango curry. Smiling like this was any other Thursday evening. Finn kissed my cheek. "Sorry about the long day. This investor pitch is killing me. But I think we're close to closing the deal." "That's great," I said, handing him a plate. "You must be exhausted." Completely wiped. He grabbed a spring roll, took a bite. "These are perfect. You always know exactly what I need." We sat at the kitchen table. Finn talked about his day, an elaborate fiction woven with just enough real details to sound plausible. He mentioned colleagues by name, described a challenging meeting, complained about a junior analyst who'd made an error in a report. I asked questions, nodded in appropriate places, laughed at his jokes about office politics. 6 years of marriage had made me fluent in this performance without realizing it. I knew exactly when to speak and when to listen. When to sympathize and when to offer solutions. How to make Finn feel heard and supported and valued. I'd become so good at it that I could do it on autopilot while my mind worked on something else entirely. "How was your day?" Finn asked, the question reflexive. He was already scrolling through his phone, checking something. "Productive," I said honestly. "I'm working on a new project. Long-term analysis of organizational patterns and resource allocation. It's going to take some time, but I think the results will be significant. That's my brilliant wife." He reached across to squeeze my hand, still looking at his phone. Always 10 steps ahead. He had no idea how right he was. Or how badly he'd underestimated exactly what 10 steps ahead meant. That night I lay in bed next to Finn while he slept. His breathing was steady and even. Deep sleep. The kind that comes from a clear conscience or a complete lack of one. I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of knowledge pressing down on my chest. 3 years. 1,000 days of lies. Coming home to me after being with her. Kissing my cheek with the same mouth that had kissed hers. Sleeping in our bed with the same ease he probably felt in hotel rooms on the 7th floor. The betrayal should have destroyed me. Should have left me sobbing and broken. But instead I felt something colder. Harder. More useful than grief. Strategic clarity. Finn thought he'd built a sustainable system. Thought he could maintain 2 relationships indefinitely. Thought I was someone who could be managed and contained and kept ignorant. He'd miscalculated. I turned my head and looked at him in the darkness. His face relaxed in sleep. Peaceful. Untroubled. I wondered if he dreamed of her. If even in sleep he couldn't fully commit to being here with me. I wondered when I'd become just furniture in his life. Comfortable and functional and unremarkable. Something he used without really seeing. The version of me who'd walked into that lobby with lemon tarts felt like someone from another life. That Clara had believed in surprise gestures and small acts of romance. Had trusted that her husband's late nights were really about work. Had accommodated and adjusted and made herself smaller to support his ambitions. That Clara was gone. In her place was someone who saw clearly. Who understood that trust wasn't virtue, it was vulnerability. Who recognized that the only way forward was through. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there planning while Finn dreamed, building a strategy while he rested easy. By morning I knew exactly what I needed to do. Friday morning Finn left for work at his usual time. I heard him in the kitchen making coffee, heard the familiar sounds of his morning routine, heard the front door close with its usual soft click. I stayed in bed with my eyes closed, pretending to sleep until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I called in sick to work for the 2nd time that week. My supervisor sounded concerned, asked if I needed to see a doctor. I assured her I'd be fine, just needed rest. She told me to take care of myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was systematically dismantling my marriage from the inside out. Saturday morning arrived with Finn announcing over breakfast that he needed to go into the office. The investor conference prep is killing us, he said, buttering his toast. I'll probably be there most of the day. Sorry, babe. Don't apologize, I told him. I know how important this is. He kissed the top of my head before leaving, grateful for my understanding. For my accommodation. For being the kind of wife who never complained about his demanding schedule. I waited until his car disappeared down the street. Then I returned to his office. Thursday night's search had been methodical but surface level. I'd found what I was looking for in the filing cabinet and stopped there. But there was more. I could feel it the way you feel a storm coming. Something in the air, pressure, something wrong. I opened his closet where he kept his professional wardrobe. Suits organized by color. Shirts still in dry cleaning bags. Shoes polished and lined up. Everything reflecting the same precision he brought to every aspect of his life. Except the compartmentalization required to maintain a 3-year affair. I pushed aside the winter coats he wouldn't need for months. My hand brushed against something that crinkled. A shopping bag wedged into the back corner behind a coat he hadn't worn since last February. The bag was small, cream-colored with rope handles. Cartier written in elegant script across the front. My heart did something complicated. A lift of hope immediately crushed by knowing better. Inside the bag was a jewelry box. Navy blue with gold trim. The kind of box that holds something expensive and important. I opened it slowly. A bracelet. Delicate gold with small diamonds set in a pattern that caught the light. Beautiful. Elegant. Exactly the kind of thing I would have loved if Finn had ever given me jewelry like this. For one irrational moment I let myself believe he'd bought it for me. That I'd gotten everything wrong. That this was for our anniversary or my birthday or just because. Then I saw the gift receipt tucked beneath the bracelet. Purchased 3 weeks ago. $8,000. I lifted the box to look at the inside of the lid. There, engraved in small script, to my N always. And for Natasha. $8,000 for his mistress. For the woman who got expensive lunches and hotel rooms and jewelry with inscriptions. While I'd been carefully budgeting, transferring small amounts to savings each month, trying to build up enough for the new roof our townhouse would need within the year. $8,000 he could apparently spend without me noticing because I never questioned his finances. Never looked at that separate credit card. Never asked why his business expenses seemed so high. My hands were steady as I photographed the bracelet. The receipt. The inscription. Multiple angles, making sure everything was clearly visible and documented. Then I carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. Replaced the box in the bag. Tucked it back behind the winter coats. Made sure the closet looked undisturbed. I felt physically ill. My stomach churned. But underneath the nausea was something else. Vindication. This was evidence. Concrete. Undeniable. The kind of thing that would matter when lawyers got involved. I was about to close the closet when my hand brushed against something else. Something hard and rectangular wedged between 2 boxes on the top shelf. I pulled it down. An older Android phone. Not Finn's regular iPhone that I'd seen him use this morning. A second phone. My hands were shaking now as I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, showing a lock screen with no personal information. Just a generic background and a password prompt. I tried Finn's usual passwords. His birthday. His mother's birthday. Our address. None of them worked. Then, more out of desperation than logic, I tried our wedding anniversary. June 15th, 0615. The phone unlocked. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd used the date we promised to love each other forever as the password protecting his affair. I sat down on the closet floor back against the wall and opened the messaging app. Months of conversations. Hundreds of messages between Finn and Natasha. I scrolled to the beginning to messages from 3 years ago. Early exchanges that were flirtatious but could pass as friendly. Then crossing lines. Then crossing more lines until there was no pretending this was anything but exactly what it was. They called each other pet names. He was her F, and she was his N. Like they couldn't even risk typing full names in case someone saw. They made plans for hotel stays, discussing which days were safest, when I would be least likely to notice his absence. Wednesday afternoons because I worked from home and wouldn't question why he didn't come back to the office. Friday evenings because he'd established a pattern of working late. They discussed their feelings in messages that would have been romantic if they weren't about betraying someone else. Natasha wrote about how difficult it was pretending they were just colleagues. How she wanted to hold his hand in public. How she hated lying. The irony of that, Natasha hating lying while conducting an affair with a married man, would have been funny if it wasn't gutting me. Finn wrote about how complicated his situation was. How he needed time to figure things out. How he couldn't just walk away without a plan because there were financial considerations and he needed to protect his assets. I was apparently an asset that needed protection during the dissolution process he was already planning. There were photos. Finn and Natasha in hotel rooms. Selfies taken on weekend trips I'd thought Finn took alone for work. A conference in Chicago where he'd called me every night saying he missed me. A weekend in Portland where he'd said he was evaluating a potential investment opportunity. In every photo they looked happy. In love. Like the kind of couple you'd see and think they had something special. I scrolled to more recent messages. 6 months ago, Natasha asking when he was going to tell me. Tell his wife. Break the news that he wanted a divorce. Finn's response, soon. I promise. I just need to find the right moment. She's stressed about work right now. I don't want to add to it. How considerate of him. Waiting for the right moment to destroy my life so I wouldn't be too stressed. 2 months ago, another exchange. Natasha pushing. Saying she couldn't do this forever. She wanted a real relationship. She wanted to be able to introduce him to her friends without lying. She wanted a future. Finn, I know, baby. I want that too. Just give me a little more time. I need to organize some financial things first. Make sure everything is protected. Then we can be together the way we both want. I photographed everything. Every conversation. Every photo. Every promise he'd made to her while lying to me. My hands were cramping by the time I finished. I'd been sitting on the closet floor for over an hour, documenting the complete destruction of my marriage. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Climbed down from the closet. Closed the door. Then I walked to the living room and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of floorboards settling. Normal house sounds. Everything appearing normal on the surface while underneath, everything had rotted away. A knock on the door startled me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find my mother standing on the porch with reusable grocery bags weighing down both arms. I was at the store and they had chicken on sale, she said, pushing past me into the house. You're looking too thin, Clara. When's the last time you had a proper meal? Mom, you didn't have to. Where should I put these? She was already heading to the kitchen, unloading packages onto the counter. Chicken breasts. Fresh vegetables. Pasta. Ingredients for the lasagna she'd been making for me since I was a child. She kept talking while she unpacked. About my father's latest project building shelves in the garage. About my brother's kids starting soccer. About the neighbor's new dog that barked at all hours. Normal family updates. The kind of conversation we'd had 1,000 times. Where's Finn? She asked, looking around as if he might materialize. Working. He had to go into the office today. My mother frowned. He's always working. That boy needs to remember he has a wife at home. His job is demanding. Marriage is demanding too. She stopped unpacking and looked at me closely. Really looked. Clara, are you all right? You're not sleeping well. I can tell. I'm fine, Mom. Just stressed about work. Is everything okay with you and Finn? You two haven't been fighting, have you? The question hung in the air. I could tell her. Right now. I could say that I'd discovered my husband has been having an affair for 3 years. That he'd bought jewelry for his mistress. That he had a second phone filled with messages planning our divorce while pretending everything was fine. But my mother was from a generation that believed marriage was forever. That you worked through problems. That divorce was failure. She'd been married to my father for 38 years, through good times and hard times, and never once considered leaving. I wasn't sure she'd understand why I didn't want to try to save this. Why reconciliation wasn't even on my radar. Why my first instinct was strategy rather than crying and begging him to choose me. We're not fighting, I said. Everything's fine. She studied my face, unconvinced. You'd tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? Of course. He squeezed my hand. Promise me you'll take better care of yourself. Don't let work consume you the way it consumes Finn. Life is more than career achievements and earning money. You need to nurture the important things. Like my marriage, she meant. The marriage that was already dead, I just hadn't buried it yet. After she left, I stood in the kitchen surrounded by groceries she'd bought because she worried I wasn't eating well. The gesture was loving, sweet, the kind of thing mothers do. And I couldn't tell her any of it. I moved to the living room and sank onto the couch. Really looked at this space I'd created. The throw pillows I'd chosen. The bookshelf filled with novels we'd collected together. Our wedding photos on the mantel, both of us smiling like we believed in forever. When did Finn stop choosing me? Was there a specific moment? A day when he looked at me and decided I wasn't enough anymore? Or was it gradual? A slow drift where he found someone more exciting, more polished, more aligned with the life he wanted? I thought about all the small sacrifices I'd made. Turning down that promotion because travel would be difficult with Finn's schedule. Hosting dinner parties for his colleagues where I smiled and played the perfect hostess. Learning to make his mother's recipes so he'd feel connected to home. Accommodating his career because it earned more money and therefore seemed more important. Had any of it mattered? Had he even noticed? Or was I just comfortable background noise in his real life? For the first time since discovering the truth, I let myself cry. Not delicate tears. Not the kind you can wipe away and pretend didn't happen. Gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. The kind of crying that leaves you physically exhausted and unable to catch your breath. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had. For 6 years of building a life with someone who was simultaneously building a different life with someone else. For every sacrifice that turned out to be pointless. For the version of myself who'd believed love was enough. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I washed my face, made tea and sat back down with my laptop. Grief was natural. Grief was allowed. But grief wouldn't protect me. Only action would. I opened my laptop and pulled up the list of divorce attorneys I'd researched. 5 names. 5 different approaches to dissolution. 5 potential paths forward. Patricia Hawthorne's name sat at the top. Her reviews mentioned words like thorough, strategic, and doesn't back down. Her website showed a converted Victorian house downtown rather than a sterile glass tower. Something about that felt right. Less corporate. More human. Monday morning I called in sick to work again. My supervisor's concern had graduated to worry. Claire, maybe you should see a doctor. This is the 3rd day in 2 weeks. I have an appointment today, I told her. Not technically a lie. Patricia Hawthorne's office was exactly as pictured. A pale yellow Victorian with white trim and a small garden out front. A brass plaque by the door read Hawthorne Family Law. Professional but not intimidating. The receptionist led me to a 2nd-floor office with large windows overlooking the street. Patricia stood to greet me. She was in her 50s with gray hair she clearly didn't bother dyeing, wearing slacks and a blazer that looked comfortable rather than designer. Her handshake was firm. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I said. "You sounded like someone who needed to talk sooner rather than later." She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "Tell me what's going on." I'd prepared for this. Practiced what I'd say. But sitting there in her office with sunlight streaming through the windows, the words came out more raw than I'd intended. "My husband has been having an affair for 3 years. I found out 6 days ago." Patricia's expression didn't change. No shock, no judgment. Just professional attention. "And you've come to me because you want a divorce." "Yes." "Tell me everything." So I did. I walked her through the receptionist's words in the lobby, following Finn to the hotel, finding the credit card statements, discovering the second phone, the jewelry for Natasha. I showed her the photographs I'd taken. Every credit card statement. Every text message. Every hotel receipt. Every piece of jewelry purchased for someone else. Patricia reviewed it all methodically. She asked clarifying questions. Took notes on a legal pad. Her pen moved steadily across the paper, and I watched her build what would become my case. Finally, she looked up. "You have an exceptionally well-documented case, Clara. Most people come to me with suspicions and maybe one piece of concrete evidence. You've built an entire paper trail. I'm a data analyst. It's what I do. It shows." She set down her pen. "But before we go any further, I need to ask you something important. What do you want from this divorce?" The question stopped me. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence and building a case that I hadn't fully articulated what I actually wanted. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm not trying to destroy Finn. I'm not looking for some massive payout. I just want..." "What?" What's fair? Compensation for 6 years where I supported his career while putting mine on hold. Recognition that I contributed to our shared life even though I earned less money. For him to understand that there are consequences to his choices. Patricia nodded. That's reasonable. And achievable. Let me outline what I'm thinking. She walked me through a strategy that was both thorough and frankly ruthless. Document everything. Secure assets quietly. Build the timeline of his affair to establish a pattern of deception. Use the evidence of marital dissipation. Money spent on his mistress that should have gone to marital expenses. File for divorce at the moment of maximum impact. I'm not going to lie to you, Patricia said. This won't be easy. Living with this knowledge while preparing your case will be one of the hardest things you've ever done. But it will be worth it when we're negotiating your settlement. I hired her on the spot. 3 days later, Patricia called with information I hadn't asked for but apparently needed. I did some background research on your husband, she said. Standard procedure. I wanted to know if there were any previous legal issues, financial problems, that sort of thing. And I found something interesting. You mentioned Finn was engaged before you. To a woman named Stephanie. Stephanie Kerrigan. The engagement ended 6 months before we started dating. Finn said they wanted different things. That's not quite accurate. Papers rustled in the background. My investigator reached out to Ms. Kerrigan. She was hesitant to talk at first, but when she heard Finn was married and potentially getting divorced, she opened up. My stomach tightened. What did she say? Finn cheated on her. Multiple times. With women from work. When she confronted him, he convinced her she was being paranoid and jealous. Gaslight her, essentially, until she questioned her own perceptions. She ended the engagement because she couldn't trust him, not because of mutual differences. I sat down heavily on my couch. He did this before. He did. Miss Kerrigan said she wishes someone had warned her about his patterns before she wasted 3 years. Her words, not mine. 3 years. The same amount of time Finn had been with Natasha. The same amount of time he'd been deceiving me. Clara? You still there? I'm here. My voice sounded far away. I'm not the first. No. But you're the first one who's documented it this thoroughly. The first one who's fighting back strategically rather than just walking away. After we hung up, I sat staring at nothing. Finn had a pattern. This was who he was. Someone who maintained relationships through deception, who compartmentalized so completely he could look you in the eye and lie without hesitation. I thought I was special. That what we had was real, just damaged by his poor choices. But I was just another woman in a pattern. Another 3-year cycle of deception. The thought should have devastated me. Instead, it clarified everything. This wasn't about me being insufficient or Natasha being better. This was about Finn's character. And that I couldn't change. Patricia's strategy included steps I needed to take immediately. Quietly. Before Finn realized what was happening. I opened a new bank account at a credit union across town. Began transferring small amounts from our joint savings. $200 here. $300 there. Never enough to trigger alerts or raise questions, but enough to build a cushion for whatever came next. I gathered documentation of everything we owned together. The townhouse deed from the fireproof safe. Our car titles. Investment account statements I found in Finn's office. Retirement fund information. Going through the financial documents revealed things I hadn't paid attention to before. Finn had opened a separate investment account 2 years ago. Solely in his name, but funded with transfers from our joint account. Thousands of dollars moved systematically over months. I photographed the statements and emailed them to Patricia. Her response came within an hour. This could be considered marital dissipation of assets. He was preparing to protect his money while still married to you. We can use this. I also started tracking Finn's patterns more carefully. I created a spreadsheet, password protected, stored in my secure cloud folder, cross-referencing his stated whereabouts with the evidence I'd gathered. Wednesday afternoons, claims to have investor meetings or client lunches. Actually meets Natasha. Every single week for 3 years. Friday evenings, says he's working late or has work events. Actually with Natasha. 3 out of 4 Fridays per month. Weekend work trips, several per year. Credit card records showed hotel stays in cities where Westridge Capital had no business presence. The pattern was clear, methodical, predictable. Finn wasn't even creative about his deception. He'd found a system that worked and stuck to it. Knowledge became power. I knew when he'd be lying before he even opened his mouth. But living with this knowledge was destroying me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every morning, Finn kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. Every evening we had dinner together and discussed our days. He asked about my projects at work and I told him carefully edited versions that contained nothing about divorce attorneys or asset protection or building cases. Some nights he reached for me in bed. In those moments I had to decide, maintain the charade completely or start creating distance. I chose to maintain it. Patricia had advised me to act normal, to give Finn no reason to suspect I knew anything. The element of surprise would be crucial when we finally filed. But it cost me. I started having nightmares. Not about the affair itself but about confrontations that hadn't happened yet. In my dreams, I'd tell Finn I knew everything and he'd look at me with such disdain, such dismissiveness that I'd wake up shaking. Food tasted like nothing. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose. I forced myself to eat enough to avoid raising concerns, but everything felt like cardboard in my mouth. At work, my colleague Jenny cornered me by the coffee maker. "Clara, are you okay? You seem really distracted lately." "Just a lot going on," I said, pouring coffee I didn't want. "Is everything all right at home?" "With Finn?" The question was innocent. Concerned. Jenny had met Finn at a few work events and thought we were a great couple. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just busy season for both of us." She studied my face like she wanted to push further but ultimately just squeezed my arm. "If you need to talk, I'm here." I thanked her and escaped to my desk, where I could sit alone with my carefully maintained facade. The loneliness of carrying this secret became its own burden. I was surrounded by people, Finn, my family, my colleagues, but completely alone with the truth. My sister Diane still called every Tuesday for our coffee dates. I made excuses. Too busy with work. Feeling under the weather. Next week for sure. She finally caught me on the phone. "Claire, you're avoiding me. What's going on?" "Nothing. I've just been swamped." "Liar. You're a terrible liar, you know that? Is it Finn? Did you two have a fight?" "We're fine, Dee. I promise." But my voice must have betrayed something because she went quiet. "Then, when you're ready to talk, I'm here. Whatever it is, I'm here." I thanked her and hung up before she could hear me cry. The isolation was complete. I lived in a house with someone who thought I was blissfully ignorant. I worked alongside people who thought I had a stable marriage. I had family who thought everything was fine because that's what I kept telling them. Only Patricia knew the truth. And she was being paid to know it. At night, lying next to Finn while he slept peacefully, I'd stare at the ceiling and think about how sustainable this was. How much longer I could maintain this performance before something in me broke completely. But every time I thought about confronting him early, about just ending it now, Patricia's voice would echo in my head. "The element of surprise is crucial. The moment he knows you know, he'll start protecting himself. We need everything in place first." So I held on. Maintained the charade. Smiled when I was supposed to smile. Laughed when I was supposed to laugh. And quietly, methodically built the case that would end my marriage on my terms, not his. 2 weeks after hiring Patricia, an email notification appeared on my phone. Westridge Capital's annual investor conference. 3 days at the Grand Harbor Hotel starting next Thursday. I remembered Marcus mentioning this event back when I'd run into him at the grocery store. Finn had mentioned it too in passing, the way he mentioned most work events. "Boring stuff. You'd hate it." I forwarded the email to Patricia. Her response came within minutes. "You should attend. Spouses are typically included in social events. Your presence establishes you as an involved partner, helpful for proceedings." I read her message 3 times, understanding what she was really saying. This was an opportunity. A chance to be visible in Finn's professional world before that world learned about the divorce. I checked the conference website. Spouses and partners were indeed welcome at all social events. There was even an online registration form. I filled it out before I could second-guess myself. That evening, Finn came home carrying takeout from the Italian place we liked. He was in a good mood, talking about how the conference prep was finally coming together. "The presentations are solid," he said, twisting pasta onto his fork. "Richard thinks this could be our best year yet for bringing in new investors." "That's great," I said. Then, carefully casual, "Actually, I was thinking I might come this year." Finn's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Come where? To the conference. I saw the email about spouses being welcome at the social events. I thought it might be nice to see what you actually do at these things. His expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise. Discomfort. Something that looked like panic before he smoothed it away. Clara, it's going to be incredibly boring. Just a bunch of financial presentations and networking. You'd hate it. Maybe. But Diane's been on me about taking more interest in your career. And honestly, I feel disconnected from this huge part of your life. I'd like to be there. I watched him search for a reason to say no. A legitimate reason that wouldn't sound suspicious. The social events go pretty late, he tried. You'd be exhausted. I can handle late nights. And there's a lot of shop talk. People discussing market trends and portfolio strategies. I have a doctorate, Finn. I think I can follow along. He set down his fork, studying me. I kept my expression open and enthusiastic. Just a wife wanting to support her husband's career. Finally he nodded. Sure. Yeah. If you want to come, that's fine. Just don't expect it to be exciting. I won't, I promised. The relief on his face when I backed down so easily was almost funny. He thought he'd convinced me to have low expectations. He had no idea what I actually expected. The conference opened with a reception in the Grand Harbor Hotel's ballroom. I'd spent more than I should have on a dress for the occasion. Midnight blue, simple cut, elegant without trying too hard. I wanted to look like I belonged in this world of expensive hotels and investor presentations. When I'd mentioned the purchase to my sister during a brief phone call, Diane had been thrilled. See? This is exactly what I've been saying. Show up. Be present. Remind Finn you're a catch. If only she knew what I was actually doing. I arrived at the reception alone. Finn had been in meetings all day and suggested we meet there. The ballroom was impressive. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers that looked almost too pretty to eat. I spotted Finn immediately on the far side of the room. He was standing close to Natasha, both of them in conversation with a group of men in expensive suits. Investors probably. Natasha's hand rested casually on Finn's arm while she laughed at something one of the men said. They looked comfortable together. Natal. Like a couple hosting a party. I watched Finn's face as he scanned the room and found me. The smile he'd been wearing faltered. For just a second, I saw genuine alarm before he recovered and rearranged his expression into something more welcoming. He excused himself from the group and crossed the ballroom to me. Natasha's eyes followed his path, landing on me with an intensity one felt from across the room. Clara. Finn kissed my cheek, his hand immediately finding the small of my back. You look beautiful. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. He kept his hand on me the entire time we circulated. A possessive gesture I'd never noticed before. Marking territory. Making sure everyone saw me as his wife. He introduced me to partners, junior analysts, investors from firms I recognized from business news. I smiled and made small talk and asked just enough questions to seem interested without being intrusive. Then we reached Natasha. Clara, this is Natasha Winters, one of our senior portfolio managers. Natasha, my wife Clara. It's nice to finally meet you, Natasha said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Finn talks about you. Does he? I kept my tone light, friendly. That's nice to hear. He talks about work constantly but rarely mentions specific colleagues. A flash of something crossed her face. Hurt. Anger. It disappeared too quickly to identify. Well, we've been working together quite closely on some major projects, she said. I suppose the work itself dominates the conversation. I suppose it does. We stood there, the three of us, in a triangle of tension that nobody else seemed to notice. Finn's hand tightened on my back. We should keep moving, he said. Lots of people for Clara to meet. He steered me away, his fingers pressing harder than necessary into my spine. Dinner was served at round tables arranged throughout the ballroom. I found myself seated next to Marcus Chin, who greeted me with genuine warmth. Clara, I didn't know you were coming. This is great. These events are so much more bearable with friendly faces. I decided to be more involved this year, I said. Take an interest in Finn's world. Good for you. How's the wedding planning going? Marcus lit up. talking about venues and caterers and his fiancée's opinions on everything. He was easy to talk to, uncomplicated in a way that felt refreshing. For a few minutes I could almost forget why I was really here. Then during dessert his tone shifted. He leaned closer, speaking quietly enough that our table mates couldn't hear. "Clara, I probably shouldn't say this, but you seem like a good person." My attention sharpened. "Say what?" "Just, be careful. Office politics at Westridge can be complicated. Not everyone is who they seem to be." I set down my fork. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, choosing his words with obvious care. "I just think you should know that there are relationships at the firm that aren't entirely professional. And when those relationships involve people in positions of power, it can get messy." He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on his plate, but his discomfort was evident. "Are you trying to tell me something specific, Marcus?" "I'm just saying you deserve better than being kept in the dark. That's all I can say. That's all I should say." He stood abruptly, excusing himself to use the restroom. I sat there processing his words. Marcus knew. Maybe not the full extent, but he knew something was happening between Finn and Natasha. He'd been trying to warn me in his subtle way, bound by professional courtesy but clearly bothered by what he'd witnessed. The fact that Finn's colleague felt compelled to warn me said everything about how obvious the affair must be to people who worked with them daily. After dinner, I found Finn in conversation with Richard Westridge, the firm's founder. I waited until there was a natural pause before mentioning I was getting tired. Finn walked me to the elevator. We'd been given a room at the Grand Harbor for the duration of the conference. Another expense on that credit card I wasn't supposed to see. Back in the room, Finn was agitated. He paced while I removed my jewelry, his energy restless and uncomfortable. "You were asking a lot of questions tonight," he said finally. "About company operations, investment strategies. Some of the investors seemed put off by it." I was making conversation. "Isn't that what you're supposed to do at networking events?" "This is my professional world, Clara. I need you to let me handle it. I was just trying to understand what you do." "You don't need to understand it." His voice was sharp, cutting. "You need to trust that I know how to manage my own career." The closest we'd come to an actual fight in years. I could feel the tension building between us, the careful politeness we usually maintained cracking at the edges. Part of me wanted to drop the facade right now. To tell him I knew everything. To watch him scramble and lie and try to explain away 3 years of betrayal. But Patricia's voice echoed in my head. "Wait until everything is in place. Premature confrontation only gives him time to hide assets and build his own case." So instead I softened my voice. Made myself smaller. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable. Should I skip the rest of the conference events? Would that be easier?" The relief on his face was immediate and obvious. "That might be best. I don't want you to be bored, and I need to focus on the investors without worrying about you." "Of course. I understand." He crossed to me, kissed my forehead. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know." He believed me. Believed I was backing down. Believed he'd successfully redirected my attention and re-established control. The next morning, I packed my things and drove back to our townhouse while Finn stayed at the conference. I sat in our driveway and thought about what I'd accomplished. I'd established my presence as an involved spouse. I'd made Natasha uncomfortable. I'd forced Finn to publicly claim me as his wife in front of colleagues and investors who probably knew about his affair. And I'd confirmed that Marcus knew something was wrong. That honest people around Finn were troubled by what they'd witnessed but felt powerless to speak directly. Most importantly, I'd proven I could maintain the performance even in the most difficult circumstances. Even standing next to my husband and his mistress. Even watching them navigate around my presence like I was an obstacle rather than a person. Finn had underestimated me completely. He thought I was the accommodating wife who'd back down when challenged. Who'd apologize for overstepping and retreat to her proper place. He had no idea what I was actually building. No idea that every interaction, every word, every gesture was being documented and catalogued for the case that would end our marriage. I got out of the car and went inside our house. Made coffee. Opened my laptop. Sent Patricia a detailed email about everything that had happened at the conference. Her response came within the hour. "Perfect. This establishes timeline and public acknowledgement of marriage. We're almost ready to move forward." Almost ready. I could wait a little longer. Patricia called on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the conference. We're ready. Everything's documented, assets are tracked, and I've filed the petition. How do you want to do this? I'd been thinking about this moment for weeks. How to tell Finn. When to tell him. Whether to give him the courtesy of a private conversation or make it as public as he'd made his affair. Wednesday afternoon, I said. At his office. During work hours? During his partner meeting. 2 o'clock. There was a pause on Patricia's end. That's bold. You understand that we'll make this immediately public in his professional world. That's exactly why I want to do it that way. Wednesday was the day Finn met Natasha every week. For 3 years, every Wednesday afternoon at 2:30, he'd leave whatever meeting he was in and disappear for hours. It was the most consistent pattern in all my documentation. I wanted him served at 2 o'clock. 30 minutes before he was supposed to meet her. Right in the middle of the weekly partner meeting where decisions were made about the firm's direction. Consider it done, Patricia said. I didn't go to Westridge Capital that day. Didn't watch it happen. I stayed home and worked on a grant proposal that was actually due, forcing myself to focus on spreadsheets and data analysis while somewhere across town Finn's world was collapsing. My phone buzzed at 2:45. A text from Marcus. Whatever just happened in the conference room, Finn looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Are you okay? I stared at those words. Marcus knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably watched the process server walk in, hand Finn the envelope, and walk out while the entire partner meeting sat in stunned silence. I texted back, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Thank you for checking. His response came immediately, good for you. Finn came home at 4:30. 3 hours earlier than usual. I heard his car in the driveway, heard the door open, heard him call my name with a voice that shook. Clara? Clara, we need to talk. I was in the living room, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea I hadn't drunk. I'd been waiting, knowing this moment was coming, preparing myself for whatever he'd say. He looked terrible. Pegan. His tie was loosened and his hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. The divorce papers were clutched in his hand, crumpled from gripping them too hard. What is this? His voice cracked on the words. Clara, what is this? Divorce papers. I thought that was fairly clear. You can't just... Why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you come to me if you were unhappy? The audacity of that question was almost funny. Come to you? Like you came to me before you started sleeping with Natasha? He flinched. Actual physical recoil like I'd hit him. How long have you known? Long enough. Claire, please. We can work through this. If you're upset about... I'm not upset, Finn. I'm done. I stood and retrieved a folder from the coffee table. Handed it to him. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside were printouts of everything. Credit card statements with charges highlighted in yellow. Photos of the Cartier bracelet and its inscription. Screenshots from his second phone. Pages and pages of text messages between him and Natasha. Hotel receipts. Restaurant bills. 3 years of evidence arranged chronologically, meticulously documented. He looked through it in silence. I watched his face cycle through emotions. But, her. Something that might have been shame if he was capable of it. You went through my things. You maintained a 3-year affair. I think my invasion of privacy is the lesser offense. Clara, I can explain. You have until the end of the week to move out. Take whatever clothes and personal items you need. Everything else will be addressed through our attorneys. You can't just kick me out of my own house. Actually, I can. Check page 7 of the divorce petition. There's a temporary restraining order based on emotional distress. Patricia was very thorough. He stared at me like I was someone he'd never met. Who are you? I'm the woman who was stupid enough to trust you. But I'm done being that person now. He tried to argue. Tried to explain. Tried to tell me that he loved me, that Natasha didn't mean anything, that he'd made mistakes but we could fix this if I just gave him a chance. I listened to it all with the detached interest of someone observing a performance. When he finally ran out of words, I pointed to the door. The week starts now, Finn. I suggest you start packing. By Monday morning, the affair had become a professional crisis at Westridge Capital. Marcus called to give me a warning. There's an investigation. The partners brought in outside counsel to review Finn and Natasha's work. They're looking at whether the relationship created conflicts of interest or influenced investment decisions. Did it? I don't know. But clients are asking questions. And when clients ask questions, the firm has to answer them. By Wednesday, both Finn and Natasha were on administrative leave. Marcus forwarded me an internal email. Technically he shouldn't have, but he did anyway, announcing that the firm was conducting a thorough review of all projects managed by the two of them over the past 3 years. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Brennan? This is Richard Westridge. I'm calling personally to apologize for what's happened. What transpired at my firm, it's unacceptable. I want you to know we're taking this very seriously. I'd met Richard twice at company events. He was older, mid-60s, with the kind of presence that came from decades of success. I appreciate that, Mr. Westridge. Please call me Richard. I'd like to meet with you if you're willing. Discuss how the firm might address the situation. Compensate you for what you've been subjected to. Patricia had warned me this might happen. Firms like Westridge valued reputation above almost everything else. A scandal involving executives conducting an affair could damage client relationships and investor confidence. I'll have my attorney contact you, I said. Of course. And Mrs. Brennan? I'm truly sorry. This should never have happened under my watch. After we hung up, I sat with the implications of that call. Westridge wasn't just investigating. They were preparing to offer me money to avoid a lawsuit I hadn't even filed. Patricia called it correctly. The public nature of serving Finn at work made this a professional crisis, not just a personal one. The firm has to protect itself. What I hadn't anticipated was how thoroughly that would unravel Finn's career. Friday evening, I was packing up Finn's books when someone knocked on the door. Through the peephole, I saw Natasha. She looked different from the confident woman at the conference. Smaller somehow. Her hair was pulled back messily. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes. Against every instinct telling me to pretend I wasn't home, I opened the door. Clara. I'm sorry to just show up. I know I have no right to be here. You don't. I know. But I needed to talk to you. Please. Just 5 minutes. I should have said no. Should have closed the door. But curiosity won out. I let her in. She stood in my living room looking uncomfortable, out of place. This was the woman who'd been sleeping with my husband for 3 years. The woman who'd received jewelry and trips and Wednesday afternoons at expensive hotels. I didn't know, she said finally. About you. About the truth of your marriage. You knew he was married. He told me you were separated. That you were living together for financial reasons until the divorce was finalized. He said you knew about us. That you'd accepted it. I studied her face looking for deception. Found only exhaustion. And you believed him? I wanted to. He was convincing. And I cared about him. So I believed what he told me. For 3 years. I didn't see the divorce papers until the firm's investigation. That's when I learned the truth. That you had no idea. That your marriage was intact. That everything he told me was a lie. She looked at me with something like desperation. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I was deceived too. Differently than you, but still deceived. I felt something complicated. Anger, yes. But also something almost like pity. Tell me about Wednesday afternoons, I said. The Grandview Hotel. He confirmed it all. Every detail I'd documented. The standing reservation. The hours they'd spend together. The plans they'd make for a future Finn promised was coming. He said he was leaving you, Natasha added quietly. Said he was just waiting for the right time. That had been the plan for over a year. But he never did. No. Every time I pushed, he'd say it wasn't the right moment. That you were stressed about work, or his finances weren't organized yet, or he needed a few more months. Eventually I realized he was never going to leave. That I was convenient. Someone he could have without giving up his comfortable life. She looked at me directly. You want to know the worst part? He told me he stayed because you made his life easy. You handled the house, managed everything domestic, contributed your salary. Breaking up with you would have been inconvenient. Convenient. I'd been convenient. Thank you for telling me, I said. You can leave now. She nodded and walked to the door. Paused with her hand on the handle. I resigned. I'm moving to Seattle next month. Starting over. Good luck with that. After she left, I stood in my living room and processed what she'd told me. Finn had been planning to leave me for over a year. But my usefulness, my contributions to his comfortable life, had kept him from pulling the trigger. I'd been useful right up until I wasn't. The divorce moved quickly after that. Finn's attorney advised him not to fight. The evidence was overwhelming and a contested divorce would only make the professional fallout worse. Patricia negotiated a settlement that was fair without being vindictive. 60% of our shared assets. My choice of keeping the townhouse or forcing its sale. I chose to sell. I didn't want to live in a home built on lies. I received portions of his retirement accounts, his investments that I'd helped fund with my smaller salary and my unpaid domestic labor. Compensation for the promotion I'd turned down, the career advancement I'd sacrificed. The financial settlement was fair. But what destroyed Finn was everything else. The professional fallout. Both he and Natasha lost their positions at Westridge. Not officially fired but encouraged to resign. The investigation had found enough gray areas in their work to make the firm uncomfortable. The loss of his relationship with Natasha, who moved across the country to escape the scandal. The recognition that his comfortable life, the clean house, the managed household, the emotional support, had been built on someone else's unpaid labor. On a gray Tuesday in November, we met at Patricia's office to sign the final papers. Finn looked older than he had 6 months ago. Thinner. Tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. He looked at me across the conference table as we initialed page after page. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. I set down my pen and met his eyes. "You didn't mean to get caught." "That's different." He flinched. Didn't argue. We signed the last page. Patricia and Finn's attorney witnessed. It was done. As we stood to leave, Finn tried one more time. "Claire, I'm sorry. For all of it. I hope you can." "Goodbye, Finn." I walked out of that office and didn't look back. It was the last time we spoke directly. I walked out of Patricia's office into November rain. The kind of cold drizzle that soaks through your coat if you stand in it long enough. I didn't have an umbrella. Didn't care. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I walked slowly, letting the rain hit my face, feeling the weight of the past 6 months finally lifting. The divorce was final. The papers were signed. Finn was legally no longer my husband. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, watching rain streak down the windshield, and realized I had no idea what to do next. For 6 months I'd had a purpose. A mission. Document everything. Build the case. Protect my assets. End the marriage on my terms. Now that it was done, I felt strangely empty. Not sad. Not relieved. Just empty. I drove to the townhouse, still technically mine for another 2 weeks until the sale closed, and started packing the last of my belongings. I'd already moved most of my things to a small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom. A kitchen barely big enough for 1 person. Windows that overlooked a coffee shop and a bookstore. It was a quarter the size of the townhouse. But it was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture I'd chosen myself. Every dish. Every book on the shelves. No compromises. No accommodating someone else's taste or needs. Just mine. My sister Diane helped me pack the final boxes. She'd been coming over every Friday for the past month, bringing wine and takeout and her particular brand of no-nonsense support. "You know what I realized?" she said, wrapping glasses in newspaper. "You're better at being divorced than I ever was. That's not a competition." "I know. But when my marriage ended, I fell apart. You just handled it. Methodically. Like a project. It was easier to treat it like a project. Less emotional that way." "Was it less emotional? Or did you just find a way to channel the emotion into something productive?" I thought about that. About the cold clarity that had sustained me through months of living with Finn while knowing the truth. About the strategy that had replaced grief. "Maybe both," I admitted. Diane set down the glass she was wrapping and looked at me. "Are you okay? Really okay?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months." 6 months later, I knew the answer. I was okay. More than okay. I'd taken the promotion at work that I'd turned down years ago. The one that required occasional travel to oversee research projects across 3 states. The one I'd declined because Finn's schedule was so demanding and someone needed to manage the household. Now there was no household to manage. No one's schedule to accommodate but my own. I led a major initiative on healthcare resource allocation, working with hospitals and clinics to identify patterns in care delivery. It was meaningful work that actually made a difference. And I was good at it. My apartment became a space I actually enjoyed. I painted the bedroom a soft gray. Hung art I'd chosen myself. Bought plants that I managed to keep alive. Created a home that reflected who I was rather than who I'd been trying to be. Diane came over most Fridays. We'd cook together or order takeout and talk about everything and nothing. She'd started dating again, cautiously with the wariness of someone who'd been burned before. I cheered her on while firmly declining her suggestions that I should try dating too. "I'm not ready," I told her over Thai food one Friday evening. "You might never feel ready. Sometimes you just have to jump." Maybe. But not yet. My mother had struggled to understand at first. When I'd finally told her the full truth about Finn's affair, about the 3 years of deception, she'd been shocked. Hurt on my behalf. But also confused about why I hadn't tried to save the marriage. "Counseling," she'd suggested. "Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes marriages can be healed." "Not this one, Mom. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. A choice he made repeatedly for 3 years." She'd processed that slowly. Eventually came around. Called me one Sunday morning and said, "I'm proud of you. For how you handled it. For your strength." Hearing that mattered more than I expected. I started therapy in January. Found a counselor who specialized in betrayal and rebuilding self-worth after infidelity. Dr. Morrison was in her 40s, practical and direct without being harsh. "What do you want from these sessions?" she asked during our first meeting. "I want to understand why I didn't see it. Why I ignored every instinct telling me something was wrong. And I want to make sure I never ignore those instincts again." We worked through it systematically. The ways I'd made myself smaller to accommodate Finn's career. The warning signs I'd dismissed. The difference between healthy compromise and losing yourself in someone else's ambitions. "You're not defined by his choices," Dr. Morrison told me during one session. "You're defined by how you responded. And you responded with clarity and strength." It didn't feel strong. It felt cold. Sometimes strength looks like cold clarity. Sometimes survival requires shutting down the emotions that would paralyze you. I learned that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. That I was actually good company for myself. That I could make decisions without considering someone else's preferences or schedule. I learned to trust my instincts again. To listen when something felt wrong instead of reasoning it away. Marcus Chin became an unexpected friend. He left Westridge Capital 3 months after the scandal, saying the culture had become toxic. Too much focus on profit over ethics. Too many people willing to look the other way when convenient. He took a position at a smaller firm that aligned better with his values. We started meeting for coffee every few weeks. I almost said something, he told me during one of our meetings. Before the conference. I'd seen enough to know something was off between Finn and Natasha. But I didn't know if you knew. Didn't know if speaking up would make things worse. "I don't blame you for that." Finn put everyone in an impossible position. Still, I should have said something more direct. You tried to warn me. I appreciated that. Marcus got married in August. He invited me to the wedding and I almost declined. The idea of watching someone promise forever felt complicated. But I went. And it was beautiful. During the reception, his wife Sarah found me. "Marcus has told me so much about you. Thank you for being such a good friend to him during the transition. It meant a lot." I realized I had the capacity to trust again. Not blindly. Not naively. But carefully with boundaries and awareness. That was growth too. 9 months after the divorce, I ran into Finn at a coffee shop downtown. I was meeting Diane for lunch. Arrived early and ordered a latte. Turned around and nearly walked into him. "Clara." He looked surprised. Uncomfortable. Older somehow. Tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "Finn." We stood there for an awkward moment. Other customers moved around us, ordering drinks and finding tables. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just for a minute?" I almost said no. Almost walked past him and waited outside for Diane. But curiosity won out. 5 minutes. We sat at a corner table. Finn's coffee sat untouched in front of him. "I'm not at Westridge anymore," he said. "Smaller firm. Significant pay cut. It's been an adjustment. I'm sorry that's been difficult for you. I'm in therapy." trying to understand why I made the choices I made. Why I thought I could sustain that kind of deception. He looked at me directly. I think about you a lot. About what I destroyed. What I had and didn't value until it was gone. I waited for some feeling to surface. Anger. Satisfaction. Even pity. Nothing came. Just a neutral acknowledgement that this person sitting across from me used to be important and now wasn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I know that's not possible. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. What I lost. What you gave me that I took for granted. Okay. Are you doing all right? I'm doing well actually. Better than I expected. He nodded. Something that might have been pain crossed his face. I'm glad. You deserve that. My phone buzzed. Diane texting that she was running late. I should go, I said standing. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, Finn. I really do. Clara. Take care of yourself. I walked out of that coffee shop and met Diane for lunch at the restaurant next door. Told her about the encounter over sandwiches and soup. How did you feel? She asked. Nothing. I felt nothing. That's probably healthy. It felt strange. Like looking at someone from a past life. Someone I used to know but don't anymore. That's exactly what he is. The life I built after the divorce wasn't the one I'd imagined when I married Finn 6 years ago. It was smaller in some ways. Fewer square feet. Less financial cushion. No partner to share morning coffee or evening dinners. But it was bigger in ways that mattered more. More authentic. More aligned with my actual values rather than values I'd adopted to maintain peace. More mine. I'd learned that betrayal could be a strange gift if you let it teach you rather than destroy you. It taught me to trust my instincts. To value myself. To refuse to accept less than I deserved. The woman who stood in that marble lobby holding lemon tarts felt like someone from another lifetime. That Clara had believed in surprise gestures and small acts of romance solving everything. This Clara knew better. Knew that love without respect was worthless. That partnership required honesty. That being alone was better than being with someone who made you feel invisible. I was grateful to that earlier version of myself. For finally paying attention to what her gut was telling her. For having the courage to look directly at truth even when it was devastating. And I was grateful to who I'd become. Someone stronger than I knew. Someone capable of standing alone. Someone who'd survived betrayal and built something new from the wreckage. This was my story of betrayal and revenge. But more importantly, it was my story of survival and rebirth. I wasn't defined by what Finn did to me. I was defined by how I chose to respond. And I'd chosen strength. Strategy. Survival. I'd chosen myself. That was enough. If this story of calculated justice kept you glued to your screen, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Clara served those divorce papers right in the middle of his partner meeting. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.